Here's a question I used to ask my students on the first day of school. What do you actually want to know? And every year, the same thing happened. They'd walk in, look at the board where the question was written, sit down, and stare. Not because it was hard, but because no one had asked them that in a really long time. Most of us are not practiced in asking. We're only really practiced in answering them. We answer them at school, at work, from our families, in every meeting. Someone wants a status update, but not any real thought about anything. But the question is where the thinking actually begins. And somewhere along the way, it's like we stopped asking the good questions. Today, I want to talk about why and what it might look like to take that all back. First, I want to make a distinction that I think matters a lot. There are two kinds of questions. The information questions. What time does it start? Where is it located? How many people were there? What's the deadline? And those are fine. We need those questions. But those are not the questions that I'm really talking about here. And then there's questions that I'd like to call live questions. Questions that you genuinely do not know how to answer. Questions that kind of make you feel a little uncomfortable because you can't really Google your way out of them. They're questions like, what am I actually afraid of here? What would I do if I weren't trying to look competent? What's the version of this idea that I haven't let myself say out loud yet? Those are the live questions. And those are the kind of questions most of us are starving for. Here's the thing I've noticed, especially when I sit in a room with adults, in book clubs, chatting with friends, in work meetings, when those live questions are asked, there's this sense of silence that kind of falls among the room. And I think what's different about this silence is it's not like a silence of confusion. It's like a silence of trying to find the answer. It's this silence where people are going within themselves to find how they really want to answer that kind of question. And I think what I've learned is that silence is rare because so much of our lives don't involve those live questions. And I think it's really important that we put ourselves in rooms and in conversations where those silences are mandatory because it is requiring us to search within ourselves to find the answers. So what happened? Why don't we ask those questions anymore? I honestly think there's probably a few things going on. The first thing is when questions feel like admissions. To ask a real question, you're kind of admitting you don't know something, right? And in professional context, and maybe even social context, depending upon who you hang out with, admitting that you don't know something can be perceived as a weakness. So we tend to skip the questions entirely and go straight to the answer, even if the answer is half formed and the question could have made it better. I think the second reason why we've moved away from asking these types of questions is that the pace of our lives doesn't really allow for it. A live question needs room to breathe. It needs a few seconds of not knowing before it can open into something real. But most of our conversations don't have that. They just move too fast for it. Someone asks something and the room fills too quickly with probably not the right answer just to fill the silence. In teaching, we would call this wait time. My wait time was so good. I would honestly wait almost uncomfortably long so that the students had to know that I wasn't going to give them an out for the answer. And however long it took to find that correct answer, the answer that felt most real, that time is really valuable. And it's something that we're missing in our modern lives. I started to think that maybe speed is the enemy of good questions. Not because slow people ask better questions, but because a question needs time to land before anyone can really answer it. The third reason, and I think this one might be the most interesting, is that we've confused curiosity with efficiency. We've been taught that good questions get you the answer quickly. And that might be true for information questions, but for live questions, that's not really the vibe. A live question isn't a shortcut, it's a door. You don't go through it because it's efficient. You go through that door, you go through that question because something on the other side matters to you. And a lot of us, maybe somewhere in our 20s when the workload just became unbearable, we just stopped walking through doors that weren't efficient. All right, so to fix this, I'm gonna give you 5 steps. I have realized this in my many years of asking questions and sitting in rooms with people trying to find answers. The first thing is to slow down before you answer. Not performatively, not to make this long suggestive pause, but because we're slowing down, that's where you're gonna get to the heart of what you really think and feel. It should be long enough for you to really not know for a second. And this might sound simple, but it's surprisingly really hard to do. We're wired for speed. We're wired to know the answer and to give it quickly. We're also wired to fill the silence. So next time, just try filling it a little less and see what shows up. The second thing is notice when you're asking asking questions you already know the answer to. This seems like it happens a lot in conversations and meetings, maybe even in dialogues that we run in our own heads. Like asking ourselves, should I do this? When I already know what I should do. I already know what the answer is. That's not really a question. That's a verdict wearing a question mark. A real question keeps the end genuinely open. The third thing, and I think this is something I keep coming back to and something I want to do more of myself, is to write the question down before you try to answer it. Something about writing a question down makes us face it with a little bit more honesty. You have to actually form it. You can't just like say it vaguely. And once it's written, you can really look at it. You can stare it directly in the face. And sometimes what you see is that you're asking the wrong question entirely. I keep a notebook and it is filled with lots of ideas. No, you can't read it. But it also has a lot of questions. And I think it's really necessary in order for us to tap back into that element of curiosity and to find out the roots of who we are and who we want to be. I think it's really important that we write them down and try to answer them. And the answers may change, and that's okay. But the whole point is to keep showing up and asking the right questions and trying to find the answer that feels best in the moment. The students who would walk into my room and see the question written on the board about what they actually wanted to know, who they actually wanted to be, it might have taken them a while to come to an answer, to write something down, but they eventually did. They eventually had an answer. They eventually searched and formulated some response in the context of their own lives. And the ones who did, the ones who really took the time to kind of search within themselves, they wrote one of the truest answers that they probably wrote throughout the entire year in the classroom. And it's because the question gave them the permission to not know. It gave them the opportunity to be curious, to want something, and to be curious in their own terms, not any terms that anybody else had told them was important. And maybe that's just what a good question is. It doesn't get you an answer faster, but it gets you to a better starting place. And honestly, in a world that seems to be trying to force answers upon us before we've even had the chance to ask the question, I think that really matters. So if you want to tap back into this essence of like curiosity and maybe understanding yourself better, let's focus on the art of the question and asking the right questions and giving ourselves time to answer them for ourselves. Thanks for being here. If you like asking questions and if you like thinking about questions in a really slow and communal way, that's what we're here for. Muse Salon, we're all about kind of thinking about things in an unhurried fashion because the modern world really wants us to do that and we're just contrarian. We don't want to do that. We're going to slow it down a little bit. So thanks for being here. Thanks for sticking around. Hope you have some really good questions for yourself this week. And I'll see you next time.